I am being watched. I don't know why I did that weird voice. Welcome, everyone. This is my review of season 1, episode 13 of Person of Interest. It is called Root Cause. So, spoilers for the episode, as always. As this is a big episode, part of that's because I just know the character that's introducing this is going to be a relatively big deal in the future. I don't remember too much, but I do remember which actor is going to play this role. In this episode, of course, you only see this character from the back of the head. You see their hands. You can tell it's a woman, but beyond that, you don't really get a sense of who it is yet. In fact, if anything, it was maybe even a little distracting because I know who's going to play this character, and I could kind of tell that they didn't have her for these little moments. You kind of, admittedly, the back of a head with long hair, it could be anyone really, but there's something about it where you just know, they didn't have her cast yet, and they're kind of playing with the fact that they can get away with this for now because they're just teasing someone who is a computer hacker, someone who's equal or perhaps even better at this stuff than Finch is, and that's the big thing this episode introduces. But that's not to say that the rest of it doesn't have a lot of merit, because I really like this episode even outside of this, because once it sets up what it's doing, with this sort of wrongfully convicted person. So we get this, the person of interest early on, and it's this married man who seems to live a normal life. He goes to work every day, and then quickly it's revealed that he's actually been out of work for a number of months, and he's lying to his wife, and he's just spending his days looking for work. He's not really doing anything wrong, but he's just telling, he's ashamed to tell his wife, so he's looking for work. And this goes on for a little, a few scenes where they're kind of like trying to figure out what's going on. And I was kind of like thinking, yeah, what if we get like a case at some point where like it does just look like the person is completely normal and there's nothing going on that could even suggest that there's some big bad thing around the corner. And that's kind of what this is up to a point. He's effectively just a patsy where he's going to be used so the bad guys are going to assassinate this congressman at a sort of re-election like campaign tour party thing, right? And they're basically going to lure this guy in under the pretense of giving him a job for a couple of days so that he'll be in the position that looks like he would be the one firing the gun that kills the politician. And they've hacked into his computer to make it look like he's been looking up sort of extreme anti this particular politician, right? So lots of hate stuff. These days you would say that he's on like, I don't know, 4chan and shit, saying how much he hates someone. And they've gave him a paper trail as if he's bought a gun somewhere, and all of it's made up, all of it's fake. This guy is completely innocent of all of it. And if anything, there's a moment where just before he goes into the building where this party's happening, where this assassination attempt's going to go down, Reese realizes and goes, oh, he's going to assassinate the politician, and he goes in. It's a big dramatic moment, and all I could think, and this is not a critique, right? Because at this point we're so used to the way this show works. But at this moment, I thought the most surprising thing that could possibly happen now after he said that is that that's exactly what's going to happen. That if he legitimately turns out to be an assassin and tries to kill this politician, that will actually be the biggest swerve possible, because I don't believe you. I don't believe that's what's going on. But that's not to say that it diminished my excitement, because it felt like it was building up to the reveal of what was really happening. So even though we're building up to him going up to the rafters and finding him, and it's very clear that he's only got like a confetti cannon thing, but it looks, vaguely gun shaped from a distance. It looks like a sort of barrel for a gun. And all of this goes down, and quite quickly you're sort of like thrown into this deep end where now it's about trying to protect someone who's innocent, someone who is now publicly on the news being accused of assassinating someone. The guy doesn't actually die immediately. He dies in the hospital a little bit later, but it doesn't really make much of a difference, other than just turning up the drama a little bit later when that news comes in. But I liked all this because once again we're protecting someone who's innocent, and that's always enjoyable because they've got like a really noble goal in that case. But in this case, it goes further because it gets to the point where this guy is then going to be targeted himself to be killed because whoever's behind this wants to tie up loose ends. So we get Reese actually sort of intervening and like kidnapping him from the FBI, and then sort of like taking him on the run with him and hiding him out because like it's too dangerous. Like whoever's behind this have got plans for the courthouse. They're going to assassinate him wherever they take him. So the best thing to do is to intervene and just like sort of take him off grid as best they can. Which is probably a good time, since I mentioned the FBI, to talk about something that was distracting this episode, but it's not the episode's fault. The show did nothing wrong. But the actor they've got playing the FBI, the main FBI guy in this episode that interrogates him a little bit, and we see him talking around Carter a few times at the police station. This actor, for over a decade in the UK, was in a series of commercials that aired before movies at the cinema. So the company's like changed its name and all that now, but they used to be called Orange, right? And Orange were a phone service company primarily, right? They're called EE now. But for a good decade or so, they had a running thing where through their service you could get buy one, get one free tickets on Wednesdays, and it was called Orange Wednesdays. And this was this promotion that ran for a long time. I was literally in like middle, maybe even early high school when this thing started, and it ran all the way up to maybe 2011, 2012, maybe even a little bit later than that. So the reason why this is relevant is because they had this series of ads to help promote it, but they sort of doubled up. So these ads were to promote the fact that they did Orange Wednesdays. It was this big partnership between the theater chains and this mobile phone company, but they also served as a reminder to turn off your phone before the movie. So the running punchline was, don't let the phone ruin your movie. Don't let a phone ruin your movie. That was the thing. And this series of ads, you can probably look them up on YouTube, but basically they'd all have these guest cameos of famous actors who would come in and they'd be pitching a movie to a room full of like movie execs. But the joke is that these were all phone company execs that worked for the phone company, and they would try and like change the pitch to be a phone promotion thing. An early one that was memorable is that Sean Astin from Lord of the Rings shows up and pitches a drama, and they say, no. Let's do a new Lord of the Rings because people like those. Also, let's make it Lord of the Ringtone, Revenge of the Phone Call, or something like that. And the joke being is you don't let the phone ruin your movie. So, turn it off so it doesn't ruin the movie, and don't, so the joke is they're ruining pitches by trying to shoehorn phone advertisements into them. Anyway, what I'm getting at here is that the main guy representing the phone company in all these like silly comedy adverts is this actor. For a decade, maybe a bit more than that, he was this like slimy executive trying to push phones into movies as like gross product placement. And that is all I can see him as. That is who this guy is. So when he showed up in a serious FBI role in this, I just like I couldn't take him seriously. He's that guy to me. The actor's name, if I can find him, is it Brennan Brown, Special Agent? That sounds right. Yep, that's the guy. And he's been in other things. He was in Focus. He was in State of Play and The Man in the High Castle. I've seen and heard some of these things. There's nothing wrong with his performance, but all I could see when I looked at him was the guy from the Orange Wednesdays ads that played literally before every single movie for over a decade. So yeah, just had to. There was a lot of backstory to explain that one, but I couldn't not bring it up because it was such a moment when I saw him. Anyway, another thing actually, just before I go on with the main plot, something I really appreciated in this episode is that it opened with the tail end of like a smaller case, and I really appreciated this because I just brought up a couple episodes ago when Finch gave Carter a little case to do on her own, and I said, oh, it's kind of funny how this one's super simple and easy. It's just this simple case of someone's going for revenge with a gun and she's able to stop him. And I sort of, joked a little bit about how there really should be a lot more simple ones in between these really, intricate plot twisty ones that we get the episodes revolving around. And so I really appreciated the idea of just starting the episode with Reese just finishing a fight that is one of these simple ones. The implication being that, yeah, these happen in between episodes all the time. We just don't see them. I thought that was really neat. And it was a bit of a comedy bit as Reese Finch is trying to talk to him over the comms. Yeah, there was a delightful little opening. I appreciated that. So, back to the main plot though. We have Reese with this guy. What's his name? Scott Powell, and they're on the run and they're being tracked. And along the way, this taps into some different things. One of them, of course, is Carter being used to help by letting him talk to his wife with her phone so that the FBI can't track it, letting Reese and Finch hear some of the conversations going on, stuff like that. But the big thing is that, of course, whoever hired this killer, because the hacking into all of these computers and stuff to make it look like he's guilty, doesn't seem like it comes from the same guy who actually shot the politician. It feels like two different people. And for a moment, I almost thought they were going to do an evil version of our two main characters. The idea that there's the guy who goes out and does all the field work, and there's the guy who does all the computery work. Although Finch does come on the stakeout this episode, and that was kind of a delightful visual, just seeing them in the car together, and Finch getting his can of Pringles out, not to eat, admittedly. He's using it for surveillance, but still. But this gets Finch looking for, okay, who's the other person, or who hired the hitman to do this? And he's looking into it, and he's tracing whoever hacked his computer, and he's tracing, he's pinging it around all the virtual locations. Whoever this is good because they've bounced it off the entire planet so that they can't be traced, all that stuff. But he gets eventually in, and it's like, okay, I'm in, and he's talking to Reese over the phone, and then quite quickly starts to panic because turns out he was let in, and whoever this is now looking at all of his computers. So it forces him to burn, not literally, but disregard all of his equipment, because now it's all connected together, and this person's, whoever it is looking at it, and this is kind of our first real hint that there's someone really important behind all this. And he gets a cheap phone from a stall outside. I thought this was a really... Obviously, most episodes have at least a few shots of people walking in the New York streets just to sort of keep that a part of the show. I really liked it. For whatever reason, him walking around the corner, buying this phone off a stall, and then walking off in that location. Something looked really good about that. It felt really down to earth, and like I was really on a New York street in the middle of the night. Well, not the middle of the night, but what I mean, the evening, when the city's still bustling. It was a good vibe. But yeah, and we finally brought in Zoe back to help. Ultimately, all she really does in this episode, other than do a bit of brainstorming with Finch, is she talks to the politician's campaign manager to basically just prompt a phone call between him and whoever's behind all this, to so they could hear it, and Finch is there listening to the phone call, and he implicates himself by saying, hey, he's supposed to be dead by now. So he's the one who wanted the politician dead, and he's hired whoever this super hacker is to help with it. And of course, we get a name for the hacker by the end. We get the name Root, because she actually reaches out and talks to Finch, and even calls him by name. She knows his name is Harold, and that feels like a big deal. I actually really appreciated this scene at the end when Harold's sitting in the library and she says Harold on the chat. I appreciated that the final moment isn't him looking scared. He's almost got a bit of a smirk, as if he's appreciating the challenge, because Root even says that to him, that she's reaching out to acknowledge that he's a worthy opponent. And it almost seems like Finch sits back and sort of thinks the same, oh, this is a challenge. So curious to see if he regrets feeling the thrill of that at a later date, depending how many bad things might happen because of this character. But it was fun seeing Zoe back and her getting involved. She's got chemistry with John. And yes, I did actually look up and realize that she was April O'Neil in the Turtle sequels. I think I may have mentioned that the following episode, but I'll bring it up again just since Zoe showed up again. And that sprung to mind actually, because when she goes up to the guy who works for the politician, the campaign manager who wanted him dead, she says the line, "I'm not a reporter," and part of me in my brain sort of went, yeah, you are, April, shut up. you're April O'Neil with Channel 6, and you'd hang out with four green teenagers and their father, who's a rat. So, yeah, it was nice seeing her back. It was nice sort of having that be in there again. And there's kind of a heartwarming feeling to the end of all this, because I think on top of this guy being innocent, you have this extra layer where it kind of seems like maybe the bad guys are even going to convince his wife that he was into all this, because they've planted an extra computer. And because he was lying about the finances, it kind of opens the door to believe that he might be lying about other things. And you feel like she doesn't want to believe anything else, but, you know, as the episode's going on, maybe it's going to get tougher and tougher. So it's actually kind of sweet and heartwarming by the end of the episode when you get to see him go home, right? Well, first of all, you get to see him come into the precinct and turn himself in, but then you see him go home and hug his wife, and there's a moment where he sees John outside the window, his guardian angel, and he goes to look closely, and John's disappeared like Batman. Because the Batman comparisons must happen every episode, because they're just so layered and, you know, sprinkled throughout. It's hard to get away from it. So no, I appreciated all that. This route is clearly very powerful, because the guy who hired her, the campaign manager, she writes a suicide note for him, really short and simple one. And when the police go to find him, when they realize he's guilty, he's just sitting there dead with a gun in his hand. So I presume Root probably sent another hitman to do this. Root doesn't necessarily seem like the sort of person who would go and do this herself, but I could be wrong. I don't know. But, you know, it really paints this sort of like mysterious idea of like, oh, who is this? This is obviously someone who's going to be popping up again later in the season, I would expect. So, no, that's good stuff. Yeah, this was a really solid episode, and I think part of the reason why it was so solid is because it managed to make each part of it, because it changes a couple times. It does have these big shifts, but each section before it shifts to the next thing, which is arguably even more interesting, it does a good job of like saying, okay, this first chunk of the episode is like we get to see Finch being more active alongside Reese, right? So that's kind of fun and different, but also this guy seems normal. And okay, we eventually find these emails that maybe imply that he hates this politician, but like other than that, he seems like a pretty normal guy. So you're sort of waiting for that other shoe to drop, and then once it switches into he's been wrongfully set up and we have to protect him now because no one else says, everyone just thinks he's guilty, that feels like a sort of flip on its head. And then eventually you've got Finch working with Zoe, and like that sort of shakes things up again. It does a good job of kind of keeping you on your toes in terms of like enjoying each segment for what it is, but it always kind of neatly builds into the next thing. And then by the end, it's quite a sort of tantalizing tease for what's to come for, you know, this new potential threat that's been introduced. But also, of course, you know, keeps these options open of Zoe reappearing again. And there's some fun little jokes in here. There's like a little bit where Finch goes to get like one of the private study rooms in the library to talk to Zoe, and he pays off like a couple of teenagers who are using it to make out. And the boy kind of like looks at Zoe and like looks at Harold and goes, "Nice man." And then at the end of the episode, when he's sitting on his computer in the library, this teenager walks past and just gives him like a little thumbs up, like he's proud of him for being with April O'Neil. So you know, we'd all be so proud and lucky, I suppose. In terms of direction, I really appreciated actually when Harold is in the library at the end of the episode and Root starts talking to him via chat. I really appreciate as soon as the very first prompt, like of her saying something comes up, like the scene actually on the nose does it later on in the scene where he actually looks around like she could be in this room. Like he doesn't know who this is. She could be anywhere. She might literally be in the same room as me. But even before he does it, kind of like obviously to sort of like to basically, you know, tell the audience, hey, if you've not already realized that she could be anywhere, he's actively looking around like that now. And we know she's not there because we see some glimpses of her by that point of her sitting in a cafe or wherever she is. But the first time she says something and Harold just kind of looks intently at the screen, the camera really emphasizes that there's a woman sitting behind them, and she's just sitting, you know, writing in a notebook or something. But you can't really tell what she's doing in that shot because she's out of focus. But it's just enough to make you think, or at least that made me think, well, oh, is that her behind them? Is she behind him right now? And she's not. And I'm kind of glad she wasn't, because it maybe would have been too much of an obvious card to play. But the fact that it's making you think that a little bit and sort of just posing the question with just keeping the visuals in line. But then, of course, he eventually does, like I say, look around the room like she could literally be in here. And because she's just typing at him, he has no way of knowing, because it's not like she's saying this out loud or there'd be any kind of commotion. It's so subtle and whatever. So really good stuff. I think all the teasing of Root is quite effective in this. It's maybe a little over the top even at points when it's just the shadowy figure at the computer and the cameras behind her. I think what makes it great is the personal touch of, like, communicating with Harold at the end, but also the way she's able to sort of clear the tracks before anything. At the end, she clears the slate clean by making sure the politician or the campaign manager turns up dead. She makes sure all of the tracks are completely erased so that she's in the clear and no one's going to come looking for her. Well, that's not entirely true. The FBI do go looking for where these computer signals were coming from, but it turns out she was using some random student's dorm room as like a sort of base for a little bit. So we get a little joke scene where the student sort of like wanders into a room after winter break and is very confused as to why there's like an army of FBI agents all hanging around. But it's I think all that stuff makes her feel fun, and almost like there's an element of mischievous or mischievous. Yeah, mischief. Not just mischief. There's an element of mischief about her. She's mischievous. Like I said, like every version of the word, whatever one was correct there, go for it. There's a playful quality, and I think like you don't feel that early on, and I think that's why the first scene of her, and maybe that's by design, that the first time you do get a glimpse of her at the computer screen and she's the shadowy person like giving the orders to the hitman, like that's probably intentionally kind of like, oh, she's just the evil mastermind. But it's later on with the switcheroo with the college dorm room and then talking to Harold where you get the playfulness kind of coming out a little bit. And that's kind of the vibe I got by the end, is that there is a little bit of a playfulness to her character. And that makes her kind of exciting as a potential threat, because she's kind of the opposite in a lot of ways to Finch. I mean, I'm basing that on very little so far, so I could be wrong there. But right now she seems kind of playful, which is not how I would describe Finch at all. In fact, the start of this episode, just before he calls Reese, they do a similar contrast thing where they have just a quiet moment of Finch pouring his tea or whatever it is, and it's like, then he's sniffing the tea and he sits down with his mug. It's a quiet day at the office, and then he calls Reese, and Reese is in the middle of a fist fight, and it's that contrast is there. But I think if you look at the start and the end of the episode, that contrast between him and whoever this Root is maybe also being, maybe just been alluded to a little bit and how different they might be. So that's good. Speaking of the hitman, I kind of glossed over a lot of his scenes. Obviously, he's there at the shooting of the congressman. He's chasing Powell, the innocent man, around, who's with Reese. He shows up at their hotel room at one point, and Reese has to fight him. Turns out that the innocent guy, Powell's got a tracker that's been placed into his shoe, which they find after the fact, and they're able to lure the hitman into a bathroom where Reese is able to strike, and we get a fun enough fight scene in the bathroom. I appreciated that it ended with Reese grabbing and hitting him over the head with the hand dryer, just because it's a weird thing to use as a weapon. I appreciate when weird things that aren't normally weapons are used as weapons, just in the same way that I appreciate when someone is shot in a movie in a really weird place. The example I always go to is that there's a scene in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where someone gets shot in the side, and I'm like, yeah, why aren't, like, everyone always gets shot in the head or the chest, or sometimes the leg if they're, going for a non-lethal kill or something, but, surely bullets sometimes hit really just random points of the body because, like, the aim's not always that good. So I just like the idea of, like, someone aiming as quick as they can, and because of that they get, like, all these weird spots at the side, they get the side of the neck rather than the middle or whatever. I appreciate that. It just makes it feel more real to me, I guess. I don't know why. So anyway, that's all that stuff. The only other thing that I want to mention, I think, before I wrap up, is there's a moment on the train, on the subway, when they're just after they found the tracker, or maybe just before they found the tracker. But they're on the train, and Reese is talking to Powell, and Powell hammers home that thing I brought up earlier about how it's not just that he's getting framed for murder, but it's the idea that his wife and kids are going to think that he's also this as well. And he actually says the line, do you have any idea what it's like for the person you love the most in the world to think you're just a killer? And the way Reese looked at him made me laugh. And he actually delivered a line. He said, "Actually, I do," but I didn't think he needed to say that. If anything, I would have cut that line. I would have just have him look at him the way he did, and then just leave it be there. Because honestly, we the audience get it. It's funny, and it makes a dramatic point, but it's also quite funny because he obviously knows that. We've spent time building that in his backstory. So no, yeah, excellent episode. One of the best of the season so far. I think when I get to the end of the season, I probably will do a top 5 of the season, at least, if not even maybe even more than that. I'm not sure, but I think there'll be one episode between the season 1 finale and the season 2 opener where I do a top 5 or a ranking or something like that of the episodes. But I do think this is up there with one of the best of the season. It feels really important. It shakes things up. So no, good. Yeah, no Fusco this episode. He's busy tailing Finch, which probably felt like a waste of his time this episode, given that Finch is with Reese most of the episode, at least more than usual anyway. So, anywho, that is my thoughts on this Person of Interest episode. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, all those things help, and of course you can support all the content by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting over there. It helps keep all the shows coming and lets me know that you guys want the episodes to keep coming. So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?